Hello, BookTube. This is the first episode in what I'm hoping will be a series of Star Trek related videos. I'm going to start out with the original series and over the year try to work my way through them. I'm not going to start with the pilot, but I'm going to with the original pilot. I'm going to start with Season 1, Episode 1, which is Where No Man Has Gone Before, written by Samuel A. Peoples. Gene Roddenberry had a lot to do with this script, but he's uncredited. And this one was directed by James Goldstone. And so what I've been doing is I'm going to go and I'm going to do this the same way for each of these, I'm thinking, at least right now. I go to the original series and I have the episode in here. I start off, if I have a copy, with James Blish. I'll go then to read the production history and all that. And these are the Voyages, the original series. This here is Season 1, expanded and revised edition. It's by Mark Cushman and Susan Osborne. So this book is Jacob Brown Press, San Diego, California. And this is 2013. So this episode, we watched it last night, and we really, really enjoyed it. A lot of the things that would become settled canon on Star Trek are a little different in this one because it's the first one. The characters aren't really into their spots yet. You do have Shatner as Captain Kirk. You have Leonard Nimoy as Spock. You don't have DeForest Kelley as Dr. McCoy. And Scotty's present as a chief engineer. And Sulu's present, but he's present as an astrophysicist. He's not the Sulu that later on we see. And what's happened is this is the first voyage, presumably, to the edge and beyond the edge of the galaxy. And we find out that early on in the show, there's a beacon that was dropped by a ship a couple centuries before. And by monitoring that, the ship of the cruise ship, the crew of the Enterprise finds out that while that ship was ordered destruct sequence and the destruction was carried out by their captain, there had been a frantic search for information from the ship's database about ESP. And when this show came out, of course, it was ESP was a big topic. So I read the Blish story. So this first aired on September 22nd, 1966. And I read the Blish story. And James Blish would take and do these popularizations, the stories in these volumes you've seen before, which this is a collection of some of the best of them. And he would pretty much stick to the script. I mean, back in those days, I can remember him very well. We didn't have any Star Trek once the series was canceled. Couldn't go to Netflix. Didn't have anything like that. We didn't even have any VHS. We didn't have anything like that. So these stories became immensely popular and important to us. So I told you before that there's no Dr. McCoy yet. Gene Roddenberry wanted DeForest Kelley to be the doctor, but each time seems like something would happen. And in this case, his director convinced him to go with someone else. So in the story, based on the script, James Blish makes a little change here, and he says, Life science is ready, sir, Dr. Piper's voice reported. He was temporary. McCoy was on a special study leave, and rather an elderly man for Starfleet service, but he seemed to be competent enough physician. So Blish writes in a little bit there to get us to have a background on why there's no McCoy. There's no McCoy because he hasn't been hired yet. So the guest star is Gary Lockwood and Sally Kellerman. And they're two members of the crew. She is a psychiatrist, Elizabeth Denner. And then Lieutenant Commander Mitchell is played by Lockwood. And Mitchell is a longtime friend and even back to Academy days with Kirk. So they have a little bit of a history, and a little bit's made of that. And when they go beyond the edge of the galaxy, they run into this like cloud that has a huge impact on the ship, burns up some of the main units that allow the ship to operate, and it knocks to the ground both the psychiatrist Elizabeth Denner and Lieutenant Mitchell on the bridge. And when they come to, Mitchell's, who has, we later find out, the highest ESP rating on the ship, and Denner's not too far behind, turns his eyes silver. And when they did that, they actually used contacts with aluminum foil in between two layers of the contacts. And I guess Mr. Lockwood did not enjoy, I guess they hurt, because he had them in the longest. So that was interesting. You see it, once you know that and you're watching the episode, you can see he's struggling a little bit. He said he could barely see it, he's acting. So he did a fine job. And so here's a picture of the psychiatrist with Captain Kirk, and that's actually the rifle he will use when they go down to the planet. So Spock's trying to convince Kirk, I mean, these guys, Mitchell's ESP powers are expanding exponentially, and he's becoming a danger and getting a god complex. So here are some sound bites from this. Kirk to Elizabeth Denner. You were a psychiatrist. You know the ugly, savage things we all keep buried. The things none of us dare expose. But he'll dare. Who can stop him? He doesn't care. Did you hear him joke about compassion? Above all else, a god needs compassion. So they're very concerned about power, and absolute power, of course, in this time in history, as we usually are anyway. So the psychiatrist has a thing, I think, for Mitchell. Even though earlier he had described her as I'm trying to think, as a walking freezer unit. And the reason they used that instead of frigid is because there were some concerns at the company that it was too sexually charged. There was a lot of care taken with that. There's also a fight scene that includes the psychiatrist, and they're very explicit with Roddenberry. She will not be thrown around. She will not bang off things. It won't be the kind of fight scenes you would have with a man. And it worked out well. I mean, so there's a little thing here where they have a note: avoid having her lifted and smashed back against the rocks, crumpling, broken. It is suggested she simply slumped to the ground after being unable to withstand the force of Mitchell's power. Because they're throwing, it looks like bolts. And so that was one of the things. And I mentioned that, and here's Lockwood. He was in a scene with the magic sword before. Many of you will probably recognize him there. And also over here is the fella, who, Paul Fix, who he was also in To Kill a Mockingbird, who played the Doctor before they could get DeForest Kelley. And He'd also, where I remember him from, is he was the sheriff, Micah, in The Rifleman when I was growing up. So he's a well-known actor. So basically, Spock is trying to convince Kirk, you got to get to this planet. We got to get the parts. It's a planet that's not inhabited. It's all mechanized, and it's for mining and that sort of thing. So they need to get there so they can abandon Mitchell, who Spock says he's just growing in power. I mean, it's exponential. They have a little quote here from Sulu. Sulu attempting to gauge Mitchell's intellectual growth. Do the math. It's like having a penny, doubling every day. In a month, you'll be a millionaire. And so his power and his arrogance and his God complex is a real danger to the ship. He can do stuff, even at the early rates of his power, that are just amazing. Make things float through the air to him, control all the ship systems. He did his own medical scan, so it looked like he's dead. It was really neat. So Spock is really pressuring, we got to get this guy out of here, or we're not going to make it. And Kirk, who is friends, this is the struggle. He's friends with Mitchell through his whole life, or his professional life. And he says to Spock, will you for 1 minute try to feel, at least act like you have a heart? We're talking about Gary. Dr. Denner feels he isn't dangerous. What makes you right and a trained psychiatrist wrong? Spock goes, because she feels. I don't. So he's just doing the calculation, and he ends up being correct. So they get to this place, this planet, and the painted scenes in the episode are beautiful. They're stunning. And they get the equipment they need, and we end up with a epic hand-to-hand battle between Mitchell and Kirk. And Mitchell obviously has the advantage. And at one point, mentally, and then a grave's dug, a perfect grave. And there's an overhanging rock over it, and then a rock headstone there, and it says James R. Kirk. I looked at it like 5 times to say, am I looking at this right? It says James R. Kirk. Most of us know that James T. Kirk, James Tiberius Kirk. I rewound it, kept looking at it, but it said James R. Kirk. So it is the earliest episode. They are trying to figure it out. So here you have a publicity shot with Sulu and Spock. There you can get a picture of Lockwood with the eyes, the contacts that just bothered him so bad. It must have been absolutely miserable. Lockwood said, it's the 6 most miserable days of my life. I'm not exaggerating. I couldn't wear those silver lenses very long. After 5 or 6 minutes, I say, you have to take them out. So, and also there was an incident with wasps on one of the sets, and Shatner got stung in the eye, and a few other people got stung, and I guess it was swollen up, but they covered it up with makeup. So, the ratings for it when it came out were excellent. It tied or won its time slots. And the story was really, really good. We very much enjoyed it. And it's aged well. The story's aged well. The production looks fine. We watched it, like I say, last night. And some of the things that were new, like the starship itself against the star field, where the stars actually look like they're moving, was very difficult at the time. I mean, it's easy to, do now, comparatively, but they had to invent a lot of these things. And the model would heat up. There's all sorts of things going on. So I very much enjoyed it. I'm hoping to do more of these if there's some interest in them, and maybe work through all the episodes. And I know they're on Netflix, so and most of the series are. So, like I say, if you want to follow along and see each episode, we'll go in order here. So, thank you, BookTube. Live long and prosper.